It's like the inner sanctum. Thank you, Neil. Thanks, everybody. It means a lot to me to be here. It means a lot to me to teach Clarion West again, and to teach first week at Clarion West, and to be the Leslie Howe Fellow this year, in honor of all she's contributed through the years. Couple of things you ought to know before I launch into this. One is something Michael Swanwick taught me years ago. He was one of my Clarion West teachers in 1994, and he taught me a very useful thing. He said, whenever you're doing a reading and you hit the point where there's a page break, that's an awkward moment. Because how do you demonstrate orally that there is a page break without a sound effect or something? Or just saying page break, which is lame. He said, take your water, warn the audience in advance, and whenever you hit a page break, take a drink of water. So that will be useful in this reading. The other thing is that I'm glad Eileen Gunn is here, because what I'm going to read, oh, by the way, it's got, I'm afraid it has sex, violence, and bad talk. And I warn you, I mean, it has some other things too, but it has.
That's enough.
Well, right. I mean, you know, I'm generous. And I wasn't sure how that worked in Seattle, you know, because I know y'all are hell on jaywalking. So I wasn't sure just how strict you were, you know, so be warned. But what I'm going to read is thanks to Eileen Gunn, because at Clarion West 1994, after a couple of weeks watching and seeing what she had on her hands, she came up to me one day and said, "Do you know about Charlie Poole?" I said, "Yeah, the North Carolina banjo player." And she said, "Yes." Said, "Charlie Poole was interesting." Said, "Charlie Poole was larger than life. I think you should write a story about Charlie Poole." And I said, "Well, okay." And I started messing with it, and it got more and more complicated, and I realized I wasn't good enough yet, so I put it aside, and I kept going back. Then I realized it was a 5-letter word for a long book-length narrative. Okay? And that scared me further, and I put it aside. And I finally got the nerve up to retackle it, which I'm in the midst of now. But none of it would happen if not for Eileen Gunn. So tonight's reading I dedicate to Eileen and to the things that happen at Clarion West and to all my students and their long-term projects. Right? The tentative title is "The Man Who Rode the Mule Around the World," and because we are in the early 20th century foothills of the mountains, North Carolina, and this is the part early in the narrative where, as with so many teacher-student stories, this is the part where the teacher passes the baton, or in this case the banjo, to the student. So I thought it was appropriate also. Plus, since I've been talking with Evan about body horror and Rebecca about old-time music, it's doubly appropriate. So, all right. Charlie Poole showed up at Daner Johnson's place one day with a new swagger in his step, a new wildness in his eyes. Hands jammed into his pockets, rocking to and fro on his heels, he acted like a little boy about to blurt the world's best secret. "Where you been?" Daner asked. "Don't answer that. I don't want people knowing where I go, and you deserve the same courtesy, but I hope you'll tell me what's got into you. You won the Irish sweepstakes or something?" "Just feeling the springtime, I reckon," Charlie said. "I hear you got a banjo needs playing." Daner grunted. I might, Daner said, if the fella shows up who knows how to play it. I deserve a chance, don't I? Charlie asked. He had some trick up his sleeve, but Daner could not figure what it might be. And besides, Daner wasn't getting any younger. Daner grunted again, lifted the lid of the cedar chest, and pulled forth an oblong object wrapped in cheesecloth. He peeled away the layers. Newer, fancier banjos existed in the world, but this one had the satisfied gleam of long use and care. The model name across the belly was stroked nearly into oblivion, only the G was readable. The strings seemed almost to vibrate on their own. Daner and Charlie looked at the banjo for a few moments, Daner with the calm, warm gaze of an old friend, Charlie with a more covetous, even angry gleam. And yet the younger man respectfully waited for his cue. Go ahead then, Daner said, turning away, opening the screen door and stepping to the edge of the porch, not watching as Charlie spent his first few moments with the instrument. In front of Daner's cabin was a broad, cool, flat slate rock that was fine for shady sitting, and Daner settled himself on it, looking up at the patchy sky through the limbs and the leaves. He registered nothing but the breeze and the familiar hollows of the rock beneath his bony buttocks, but as he sat, he flexed his fingers involuntarily. Behind him, the screen door pronged open and slapped shut, and Charlie stepped past Daner, walked to the edge of Daner's hill where the mossy path dropped down into the woods. He cradled the banjo before him. With his back to Daner, Charlie began to play. The singing voice was Charlie's unmistakable mush-mouthed yelp, but the playing, that was new. Daner was standing now in open-mouthed astonishment. Could Charlie have double-crossed his teacher, pulled one of the other banjos out of the chest while his back was turned? But Daner owned no banjo with a sound like that, not before today anyway, and he was pretty sure no one else had either. This playing had a new urgency, a new depth. It seemed to provide its own echo, as if three hands formed the downstroke instead of one. The song was one of the oldest Daner knew, one of the oldest anyone in North Carolina knew, but somehow Charlie had found more notes in it than anyone had before. Daner edged forward until... God almighty, Daner cried. Boy, what have you done to your hand? Daner seized Charlie's right wrist in one hand and the neck of the banjo in the other. Charlie held on to the neck, and for a second the two men glared at one another nearly nose to nose, as if committing to a struggle that would tear the old banjo to pieces, but Charlie let go. Daner laid down the instrument without looking at it and took gentle hold of Charlie's right hand. Charlie put up only a token struggle. The thumb and the index finger looked normal, but the other three fingers were swollen, scarred, and hooked inward as a single crab-like unit. Daner tried and failed to separate them. Ow, Charlie said. Quit that. They ain't going to work that way anymore, Daner. Daner looked pale, gaunt, 20 years older. Lord, Charlie, how'd you break your fingers? Why didn't you have them set? Don't they hurt you? Not after the first day or so. Mostly numb, to tell you the truth about it. But son, how can you play like that without feeling in them? Charlie laughed. I ain't got feeling in my picks and frets neither, but I can play with them just the same. Look just like a claw hammer, don't they? They look plumb awful, Daner said. They look, he added, and stopped. He almost had said, they look like the mark of Cain. How did it happen? When asked how he broke his fingers, Charlie liked to tell this story. Late one night he was rambling through the woods above the mill with nothing particular to do but to go on home and no special desire to do so, when an old oak stump in his path belched into flame just like a locomotive smokestack, and the devil stepped out of the flame. She had bobbed jet black hair, and she wore a tight knee-high see-through black flapper dress, and a long white string of pearls that nearly dragged to the ground. She was really something. And the sight of her made Charlie's pecker so hard it hurt, even though there were no whites in her eyes, just dark on dark, and her feet were bare and hairy and clawed like a bear's. Struck dumb with terror and desire, Charlie wondered whether she was that hairy under the dress. "Never you mind just yet," said the devil. She could hear even words unspoken, which is most of them. "I've had my eye on you for a while now, Charlie Poole." "How come?" Charlie asked. "Because I like you," the devil said. "I purely love a banjo, and I like the way you play it. I like that you do not go to church for reasons other than laziness. I like how when you pee you give your little thing 2 more jerks than are, strictly speaking, necessary. And for all those reasons, Charlie, I'm going to do you a favor, no strings attached. And if you go through with it, I might even let you take a poke at me with that little thing of yours. It would be a nice change of pace from what I'm used to, since you would be alive and willing and all." "What favor's that?" Charlie asked. He was watching her moving pearl necklace, which crawled snake-like along the front of her dress without her fingers touching it. "Why, I want to make you the best banjo picker ever to come out of North Carolina, that's all." "I'm that already," Charlie said. "What else you got?" He cocked his head to see better through her dress, but she moved away from the fire so that she wasn't backlit anymore, and laughed merrily, a lovely silvery laugh that made birds drop dead from the trees all around and made Charlie's nose bleed. "Don't try to horseshit me," the devil said. "I invented horseshit, the kind you deal in anyway. You and I both know you ain't that good, not yet, but that you want to be and could be with my help." "What's the catch?" Charlie asked through his handkerchief. He had about got the bleeding to stop. And because she looked amused enough to laugh again, he quickly rephrased the question. "I mean, what do I have to do?" "Just let me break 3 of your fingers on your right hand. They'll set up just right for picking, believe me." Charlie looked around in fear. "How are you going to drop a tree on me?" "What fun is that?" the devil said, hiking her dress up to mid-thigh and wiggling. "Just put your hand between my legs. You know where it is, and make me happy. And when I get real happy, my muscles will do the rest." "I don't want to get beneath your dress," Charlie said. "Suppose I say no?" The devil shrugged. "Then you go on about your business, and I go about mine, and the offer will never be repeated, and I wish you a lot of luck. I hear the mill down in Spray is hiring, and if textiles go south, there's always the mines." Charlie wavered. He had been sober when the devil showed up, but she was making him feel drunk and restless. "If I already broke my hand sticking it in there, what makes you think I'd stick in my pecker too? You just break it off like a stick." "Now, Charlie," the devil said, "why would I ever want to break that? It can do more devilment than a banjo even." She hiked her dress even farther then, and her necklace slithered off her neck and sidewindered across the ground to swarm whitely over one of the dead birds and begin to feed. And Charlie could not help walking forward, could not help reaching out his hand. When asked how he broke his fingers, Charlie liked to tell this story. He was out front of Dana Johnson's cabin, kneeling before a slate rock and sweating in the sun. His right hand was staked flat out on the rock, fingers separated by thick pegs wedged into the joints, wrist and forearm trussed with ropes that wrapped all around the rock. He could not move his arm, only work his fingers up and down a little between the pegs like the last leg kicks of something on its back and dying. His arm below the elbow had gone to sleep, so even those little motions were like 1,000 pinpricks going in. "This what you want, Charlie Poole?" asked Dana Johnson, who stood with one foot on the slate rock, looking down at Charlie. Daner hefted a double-headed sledgehammer, the kind used for pile driving. His ropey arm muscles bulged as he handled it. The double head was flecked with red spots, some of which were rust. "Yes, damn it," Charlie yelled. "I've been telling you for 3 hours. Go on and do it, damn you skinny winter-eating hide." "You need to understand," Daner said. "This ain't only your fingers we're shaping here. We're shaping your life. The life of a banjo picker, Charlie, is no easy life, nor necessarily a long life. Certainly not a respectable life, not like the lives of those who add columns of figures, those who answer other people's telephones, and those who move papers from one drawer to another. To an outsider, in fact, a banjo picker's life may look like no life at all, but it will be your life, Charlie, and no mistake, there will be no turning back." Yes, 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 we've been through all that 10 times, Charlie said. "What the hell is this, the Masons? Let's get it over with. Just give me one more little slug of whiskey first." "Ain't no more whiskey," Daner said. "You done drunk it all." "What? That one little flask I brought?" "Come on, Daner, you lived in these woods your whole life. The creeks out here run yellow with sour mash. Every farmer who makes a trip to the store finds reason to bring home 20 pounds of sugar. You're surrounded by the smoke from the cottage industries all around. I know you got to have a jug of corn laid by someplace. It's only human." "No, sir," Daner said, shaking his head, his white beard wagging. His eyes seemed to retreat in his head. "I renounced the drinking of alcohol," Daner said, "when I took up the banjo and pledged to make it my life, here on this very stone. Excuse me. Drinking the banjo do not mix. Guitarists, yea, may gulp it up in buckets. And fiddlers, yea, may take baths in it. And the capacious habits of mandolin players, and worse yet, alto harpists, do not bear description in the corridors of the just. But for the banjo player, the sanctified banjo player, to know alcohol is a perversion and abomination unto the Lord. For from the banjo comes the rhythm, and the rhythm must always be steady and true." There was a long silence. The sun dipped below the tree line. A warbler flitted from perch to perch. A chipmunk approached the two motionless figures, nosed around the edge of the rock, and then scampered into the woodpile and disappeared. Finally, Charlie said, "Now you tell me." "He who has ears," Daner intoned, "let them hear. I don't suppose you know any old wild-eyed hermit auto harp players." "And the banjo life you're describing," Charlie said, "well, it ain't natural. It ain't right. Hell, it ain't even human." "Now you got it," Daner said, and swung the hammer down. When asked how he broke his fingers, Charlie liked to tell this story. The bedroom door slammed open. Charlie leapt sideways, misjudged the edge of the unfamiliar bed, having been occupied squarely in the middle for a good hour, and fell to the rough plank floor, dragging half the bedclothes after him. Izzy covered herself as best she could, gathering the remaining sheet beneath her chin, one long bare leg exposed. Her father, advancing on the bed in no special hurry, seized her tiny foot in his quart jug hand. "Cover up before your own kin," her father breathed, "but rut like a sow at this wastrel, this stranger." The wastrel, the stranger, shinnied backward, gathered splinters as he yanked on his trousers and looked toward the room's only window, which was, alas, on the far side of the bed. "Daddy, don't!" cried Izzy as he slipped one meaty finger beneath her sparkling ankle bracelet, which Charlie had given her that very afternoon. His other hand caressed her foot and then squeezed it tighter and tighter, and she cried out as the small bones ground together. "What whore's jewelry is this?" her father cooed. a gewgaw that can't even be seen, lest your skirts are up and your knees in the air. He yanked and twisted the bracelet which cut into her foot before the chain broke. He dashed it into the corner, ripped the sheet two-handed from the girl's plucking fingers. He let the sheet puddle around his ankles and gazed down at Izzy as she squirmed, trying to cover herself with her hands. Charlie jerked out his shirt and sidled toward the door. "I see you, Isadora," her father said. "I see you and I know you. All your whore's equipment is known to me. And just where do you think you're going, Sonny Jim?" He continued to stare at the sobbing girl as he said this, but Charlie stopped, arrested. "You should have left sooner, son," Izzy's father said, turning his gaze to Charlie. "You should have left before you got here. It's too late now." "Please, Mr. Barnhart," Charlie said, "let you and me go outside, talk this over." Barnhart was expressionless as he slowly put his hands on his waist, moved them forward to the front of his breeches. He was a rangy, narrow-waisted man and wore twice the belt he needed, doubling it across, and sometimes was asked why he wore such a belt as that. The true answer was that he lived for just such occasions as this. It was part of his nature, that belt. He slowly unbuckled it and drew it free with a hiss, flexing the strap in his sweating hands. "No need for Izzy to see this," Charlie squawked. "Let's go outside, please." "Her name is Isadora," Barnhart said. "Named for her mother, dead these past 5 years. I'm real sorry," Charlie said, stalling. His shirt hung unbuttoned, his arms and hands were loose at his sides, his legs were braced, but he was unarmed. His own belt was draped across the room's only chair, but his belt was a poor cardboard thing, a musician's belt. The chair would be better, but it was not in reach, and to reach for it or for the banjo under the bed would be to invite Barnhart to swing. "I love that woman," Barnhart said in a flat recitation like ordering dry goods, "but she was a whore too." "Mama," Izzy sobbed, and her father, no warning on his face, whirled and whipped her once with the belt, yanking it away and turning back to Charlie before the younger man could move 2 inches. Izzy shrieked and writhed as the angry red stripe rose across her belly. "Hush," Barnhart said, still looking at Charlie. "I love you, Isadora, so you won't get the buckle end." He wrapped the naked end around his fist. The buckle swung like a pendulum, and Charlie was mesmerized. Barnhart lunged. Charlie seized the belt midway, the buckle looping behind him and taking a chunk from his back. He yanked Barnhart off balance, then headbutted him in the chin. Both men hit the floor as Izzy sprang from the bed and bolted naked through the doorway and was gone. The men rolled, cursing and kicking and gouging, fighting for the belt. Charlie could smell biscuits and molasses on Barnhart's breath. They rolled into Izzy's vanity. Its mirror slammed the wall and broke, and everything that had been heaped on the deal top in the heat of the moment now tumbled onto them: hairbrush, wallet, daisy-imprinted frock, underpants, pocket Bible, flask. Charlie punched Barnhart in the throat and rolled free, lunged beneath the bed, grabbed the neck of his banjo and swung it forward, sliding backward as he waved the fat end at Barnhart. He hoped not to have to use it. However satisfying would be the 5 bleeding welts across the bastard's face. Barnhart went utterly still. "A musician," he said. He smiled then for the first time. Her mama was always partial to musicians. Charlie had no awareness of movement, of Barnhart actually covering the distance. One instant he was crouched half beneath the vanity, his daughter's frock draped across one shoulder like a cape, and the next he was on top of Charlie with his hands around his neck, slamming the back of his head into the planks. "Banjo players," Barnhart snarled, choking Charlie while dragging him toward the door. "Banjo players with their stinking, diddling little fingers." He seized Charlie's right hand and fed it into the gap between the door and the wall just above the bottom hinge. "Jesus, no!" Charlie screamed. When asked how he broke his fingers, Charlie liked to tell any number of stories depending on his mood, some of which were partially true. "Jump for it," his buddy hollered from the boxcar door as Charlie ran alongside the speeding up train, gravel in his shoes, cutting his feet with every step. At the last possible moment, he reached for the bottom rung and lunged. It ain't no trouble at all, ma'am. I'm glad to help," Charlie groaned, tottering beneath the weight of the rich old lady's steamer trunk. Without warning, one of the anvils or encyclopedia sets or dead bodies inside shifted and sent him stumbling sideways toward the head of the boarding house stairs. "I got it! I got it!" Charlie yelled, running backward, barehanded into the outfield. "Eat this then, you son of a bitch," Charlie snarled, drawing back his fist. "Meals love apples." "Want an apple, little feller? Nice apple." 10 cents says this fan can't hurt me," Charlie said, jabbing at the blades. "Hey!" Charlie yelled across the whorehouse parlor. "Watch this!" When Charlie was finished telling Daner what happened to his fingers, Daner just stared at him there on the mountain before the cabin. The sun would still be up in the flat, but up here the sky had purpled and the night breeze had kicked up. "I never lied to you, Charlie," Daner said, and turned and walked inside. He walked slowly and judged the porch step before he ascended, and his silhouette in the rectangled lamplight of the doorway was stooped before he eased the door shut behind him, cutting off the light. Charlie heard the strap drawn across and then the latch. Yet Charlie still held the banjo, and the banjo was what he had come for, wasn't it? He had no lantern and he had to stumble his way down the slope, though he fancied that the banjo caught some of the moonlight and shone before him, as if the strings were made of silver and the frets were cut stones, like bright eyes, like stars. Thank you.